So we're going to talk about planting by the moon. As I explained earlier, we're going to start with the Indian calendar. So this is right here is Indian calendar. Everybody have a look. This is what it looks like. Turtle rattle. So there are 13 moons and a lunar cycle year. So on the back of the turtle, there are 13 plates representing each moon. Along the side are 28 plates. Each month is divided by 28 days. So you have 28 times 13 gives you 364 days, which is a perfect year. And so even in the Julian calendar, is that what it's called? That's what we use. Every few years they have to make a leap year. So even the Aztecs, they follow the same thing. That every now and then they had a day that was called a holiday. It actually exists, just like sometimes we have a leap year. How come the day exists, but it's extra on the calendar? It's because of this, you see. And the holiday that they had, it was a day that people just kept still and they didn't do anything. They kept as quiet as they can. But it's a physical day that happened, just like we have in leap year. It's a physical day that happened. So anyway, given this, so it's divided in four. There are 4 parts to the moon phases. It begins with a new moon, and we never see the new moon. We always see the second day. The second day is a little line, it's a crescent. Okay, so in our language we call it Skadziera, meaning the claw. The claw. That's the second day. And each phase lasts 7 days. So already at that point is the second. Then it goes to the half moon. Or when I looked up there, moon phases, it's called waxing. So I like that, Mr. Miyagi. Wax on, and there's wax off. I ain't going to say nothing about that, because there's also sand the floor, but that's another part. Okay? So then after that, there's the full moon, and then the dark side of the moon. So those are the 4 phases of the moon phases. So in the new moon, everything, we got 2 more days now of the new moon phase. On Tuesday, it'll change to the half moon. And so when I started to learn this, it took a long time, because then I used to go outside at night and look how the moon looked. And so like you see the moon like this, but I didn't know which side it was. So now I know. So now I can tell by just going outside. But sometimes it's cloudy and sometimes we don't see the moon for a number of days. So in our culture as Haudenosaunee people, everything that we do follows the cycles of the moon and how the stars move across the sky. So right now, the stars, and we follow the same stars as the Mayans. We follow Pleiades. So in our language it's called Onaguadala. That's what we follow. Our ceremony is all centered around that. And so pretty soon they're going to be setting over there in the west. And when they're over there, that's the time we're going to plant. Then it's going to go on the other side of the world. And then they're going to come back in the fall. And they're going to come up in the east in the fall time, and that's when we're going to harvest. Then as it moves across the sky, then when they're directly above us in the north, that's when we're going to have our midwinter ceremony. And if you look on the map, like the star maps and that, those star system will be directly over Mexico or Mexico City. And if you wonder what's the connection with that, is because our people, we actually came from the south a long time ago, over a millennium. And as our people migrated north, our foods, our varieties, the corn, it adapted to the length of the day. So what happens, a lot of people, if you take corn from New Mexico or Mexico and grow it here, what it will do is it'll grow about 20 feet in the air, and you might not produce anything. It'll only start maybe in September when the day begins to change as it gets shorter, because the further south that you go, the shorter the day is. The further north that you go, the longer the day is in the summertime. So if you go to James Bay in the summer, it's almost right around the clock. And if you go where the Inuits live, they have 24 hours of daylight in the summertime, but you can't grow corn there. So following all these things, and in the beginning, for our people, everything starts with ceremony, giving thanks and working in harmony with nature. So in the new moon phase, everything that is green, these are the things that you will plant. So that means lettuce, spinach, cabbage, those are greens. Tobacco is a green, all right? Medical marijuana is a green. So people ask me, when do you grow that stuff? I says, well, I don't smoke it, so I can't tell you, but But then somebody said, well, what kind would you grow? Medical or recreational? I said, well, I'll go industrial. Why not? Over their head. So, and tobacco, those are all greens. Herbs are greens. And also the exception to the rule in that time period is flowers, is another thing that you do in the new moon. Sunflowers, everything, that's what you start. So the second phase is half moon or wax on. Everything that has seeds inside of it's the fruit. So what is the seeds in a fruit? What's a fruit? A tomato, a cucumber, a pumpkin, a cantaloupe, peppers. Those are all seeds in the fruit. All of those things is what you grow at this time. That's what you start. And so today, a lot of people do things in the greenhouse or in their house. You still can follow that same phase, because everybody always asks me, well, what about in the greenhouse? What about in the greenhouse? Originally, we didn't have greenhouses, but now that we do, and some people do it, you would follow the same phase if you're out in the garden. So all of those things are at that time. And then in the full moon is a time when things will come to harvest. So if you observe, you'll see that ceremonies are set around the full moon. That's when the strawberries will be ready at the full moon. That's when the raspberries, all the fruits, everything comes to fruit in the full moon. And so at the full moon is all the things that are root crops. Or what are root crops? Carrots, beets, turnips, those are root crops. Those are things in the ground. Potatoes, onions. Onions, there's an exception. Onions can be started in the new moon from seed because it's a green. But once you have a bulb, and most of the time people buy them in the store, you get these little bulblets, then you put them in the ground during the full moon phase. That's what you do. And bulbs, flower bulbs. So I brought these. These are gladiolas, and these are dahlias. And as he talked about, it's very important to incorporate as much kind of flowers as you can. So when you see my postings on my webpage, I put all kind of flowers. My flowers start as soon as the snow melts until a killing frost comes. So there's always flowers continuous. And you try to incorporate as many flowers types that you can in your garden to encourage pollination, different kind of insects, bees, butterflies. And because, there's not many of that anymore, just for a variety of reasons. But we have to do the best that we can. So these are planted. So next week, when the full moon starts, I'm going to start these ones inside in a pot because it's a root. I'm going to do these ones late April or in May, right directly outside in the ground. So another thing that's important to follow is also to look at or understand, like especially in the almanac, what the long-term forecast is in your area for the season. So this year, we're going to have a dry season. So a lot of things that Graham talked about, mulching and so on, is going to be very, very important. All this information, and then we have to learn to apply that. So several years ago, I was invited to speak at a big food summit. And I had already worked on, because I knew I was going, all the phases of the moon and what the season was going to be like. And I said, we're going to have a wet season. And so what happened when I was there, and this was the 1st of May, and it was snowing. And usually in that part of the country, it's like 70 degrees at that time of the year. And I said, we're not going to plant into June. And sure enough, that's what happened. It rained, and it was wet, and it was cold, and we weren't able to plant in June, up until June. So we're almost like 1 month late. And my good friend John Cree in Ganyisadage, he said to me, he says, Steve, it seems like our seasons are getting 1 month later. And in the last couple of years, that's exactly what's been happening. The thing is, even though our fall time is longer, like we didn't get snow and it was warm almost up until Christmas, that doesn't matter, because what's happening there is that the daylight is changed. So the plants are not going to continue to grow. You see? And so what's happening is when they're taking seeds and freezing it, and they're going to dig it out of a freezer 50 years from now, where they have it over there in Norway, it doesn't acquire what they call the genetic memory of the season. So 50 years from now, who's ever here and you take them seeds, it's going to be different because of the length of the day. Our seeds, as our people came from the south, adapted. They went so far, they built villages, they stayed there for so long, and then they moved, and they moved. And as they moved, everything adapted to the length of the day. And so where we are here, we're at the most northern point of growing corn. You can't grow corn much north of this for 2 reasons, because the soil changes where we are from this point. The soil north of us becomes more alkaline, and alkaline, different kind of plants like blueberries. That's why everybody goes to, up north at Johorodo to pick blueberries, because the soil is different than over here. If our soil is too alkaline, then we do things to try to amend the soil to deal with that. So those are the things. So in the full moon, along with the bulbs, and that is a time that we harvest, and it's a time that you do your canning, because sometimes people can, and if you preserve at the wrong time, what's going to happen is that they don't keep long and they spoil. And so you always hear somebody say, well, my tomatoes got bad all of a sudden, and this and that. It's just because of that, and because we didn't have that knowledge to apply to that. So, and then anything that you're going to transplant into the garden is transplanted in the full moon, because the moon at that point it has a gravitational pull on the land, and it helps to establish the roots. So that's everything. Trees, berry bushes, whatever you're going to do is with the roots and the root system. So it's done at the full moon. And after that, the moon goes down, and they call it dark side of the moon. Not only can you listen to Pink Floyd and enjoy yourself with your medical cannabis, some people have been known to do those things. If you're happy, and you know it, clap your hands. I know that song. So that's what goes on. So I know there's a lot to talk about, but and we're kind of a little bit behind on our schedule, but and I post these things all the time on my page called Steve's Garden Tips. So all the things that we should do. But right now, in our culture, the first thing, as we did the opening this morning, everything in our society is female. So the Mother Earth, our grandmother the moon, and the plants, corn, beans, and squash, are female. When he was talking a while ago about, it's not only 3 sisters, but there's a 4th one I heard. It's called macaroni. Because when you go to ceremonies in the Longhouse, the traditional dinner there is macaroni. And one time I was doing this workshop with these younger people, and this young guy, he got up, he says, yeah, the fourth sister macaroni, they grow it in Italy, then they harvest it, then they put it on ships, and they bring it to these warehouses in Montreal. The guy was so amazing. I was so overjoyed with the way this guy talked, But it's true. So we look at these things. Yeah, it makes us laugh because it's funny, but it's a reality too. And so how do we learn by all of these things? But we need to become aware. So next week I'm going to start these. These are gourds. So in our language, this is called gatset. And a pear is called gatset gahe, meaning this shape, and the gahe meaning the fruit. That's where it comes from. And this is one of the oldest plants anywhere in the world. And so in the Longhouse, there's a dance called Gatset da Wago, meaning they're shaking the gourd. Okay? It's used for everything. This is a bowl, water jug, you name it, medicines, everything is in here. And this one I brought from Mexico with me. But we can grow these here, and when you're going to grow them, because it's a hard shell gourd, they need at least, depending on the season again, where the moon is going to be, they need at least 2 moon phases ahead of time. The other kind of gourds are the soft shell. You can directly plant them in the garden when you would plant pumpkins or squash or any other thing. So, but this one needs like 2 months ahead of time. Then you transplant it. So everything, so that's how I follow them when I'm gonna plant. When I'm gonna start some plants, like this week coming, I'm gonna start my tomatoes. It's gonna be perfect because by the time you're gonna transplant, it's gonna all work out. And then later, I'm gonna do melons. Melons need in our area at least 1 month ahead of time. If you put 2 months, the melons will be too big. So you need them only at a certain size, and you need to put them in a pot that will decompose in the ground. Because if you take it out of a pot and you disturb the roots, a lot of times it won't take. So you have to consider all these things. So when you do stuff. A sweet potato, I was just thinking that's a different type of plant. It's not the same as regular odonata, but that one it should be already started now. So when we were kids in school, as part of the science, we used to put a glass jar and we used to put toothpicks and put it in there and set. So that's how they start sweet potatoes. Then they call it a slip. So they take these slips later and then they plant them. In our area, we're almost not in a good area to grow sweet potatoes. If you like, try it as an experiment to see what you get. And the same thing with like different kind of like watermelons. We're not in a watermelon area, but there's some that will grow. So I always encourage people, grow what you know that's gonna be okay. But if you have interest, do a little bit of that. And then sometime what happens while you're doing these things, even like with watermelons, it'll adapt to our area and our climate. So anyways, having said that, right now I want to introduce, as I said, a good dear friend of mine that I met some years ago at Six Nations at a big seed conference that was there. We've become good friends since then because we had similar interests. And I listened to her presentations, and we've been working with our own seed network, Haudenosaunee Seed Keeping Society. And so we have people from our different communities throughout the Confederacy that we've been working with for at least 25 years. And we still maintain to do these things. And so it's very important. Last year, she wasn't able to attend because of the COVID. And so I'm very pleased and honored that would have Janice Brant. I don't remember her Mohawk name, even though I was there when she had a naming ceremony. But I like to introduce Janice from Tyendinaga, And she's been a seed saver. She's been an inspiration to a lot of people. She's also been involved in a seed sanctuary that they acquired a whole collection of seeds that were kept by a religious order of nuns. They were probably the good nuns, because when I went to school, we had the bad nuns, you know. And the only thing I remember about the nuns that we had, we used to get hit with a stick, and especially in the morning, because every morning when we got up, we had to sing "God Save the Queen," and if we didn't get it right, we got hit with a stick, you know. And after all these years, I finally found out that we were singing about Freddie Mercury. Now,
Go ahead, Dr. Niyonggats. Wakskalewa gani Kinyong gehaga ni wakanjodo, kuntege ni kidero, danong kontege ganagare. I'm really glad to be here today. Thanks for inviting me. Steve asked me if I would talk about Haudenosaunee seed keeping. And usually you can't shut me up, but today I can't even decide where to begin because there's a lot of information. And for myself, I was raised on a farm, so seed keeping has been a part of my life since I was born, since I was able to walk and talk. And when other kids had G.I. Joe and Raggedy Ann and Barbie, I would put seeds in a baby food jar and walk around with them and play with them. And I would take them to school even because all the other kids took their toy to show it off. So I would take my toy and show it off. So even when I was growing up, the teachers at my school, they knew my gifts and they encouraged me. And for a long time on my path, I wanted to try to get away from farming and seed keeping. And even in some regards, like, you know, people in my community, you know, made me feel like that's a really hard row to hoe, to be a farmer. And so I decided to be a teacher instead. And lo and behold, it just circled me right back around to being a seed keeper. And now I just talk about seeds and seed keeping and share about that kind of information as best I can. And Steve, I felt like you cut your seed talk about, or your talk about the moon really short, but I brought a diagram if it's okay to share it. That might help with what Steve was sharing, because we sort of a couple of years ago started just drawing out the moon cycle and different things to explain to funders why we needed year-long funding for the seed sanctuary, because it's not a garden project, it's a seed keeping project. And it's actually not even a seed keeping project, it's a seed conservation project, because what you may find out as you seek Haudenosaunee seeds specifically, you may find that they're rare and there are shortages of those seeds. So when we talk about eating our own diet and all of those things, we first need to get more seeds and our seed levels brought up so that those things are available for consumption. So I brought a few jars like from my pantry. I just was in a little bit of a rush yesterday, so I just grabbed a few jars out, not even full ones, but sometimes people look at that and say, wow, you have a lot, you know? And then I tell them, that jar only makes 2 pots of soup. That was a lot of work to make those seeds, because they are also our food. Like, I think it's like 80 or 90% of what we eat per day is seed. And if it's not seed directly, it's immature seed, or the plant didn't get to be fully mature. Like when you eat that cucumber, that's not a seed, that's not the seed, but that would be the seed if it was allowed to ripen and finish growing. So we really need to think about seed as a special gift from our ancestors that's been handed down to us. It's the source of life. It's the foundation of our agriculture. And so, yeah, I just want to emphasize how important it is to when you plan your gardens, not just to plan for eating or preserving, but you're planning for also good seed keeping practices so that you only have to buy that seed one time. You know, like a person came to me, he said, "I like to trade you these big, nice, juicy steaks for some of your famous white corn." Say, I'm just embellishing a little, but say, I say, sure, I like those big, juicy steaks. I said, "Here's a cob of my white corn." He says, "Oh, well, I don't think that's a fair trade. I'd like a half bushel of corn." I said, "I'm sorry, but I said, I only get to eat that juicy steak one time at one meal, and you will walk away with corn for the rest of your life if you choose so." So who gets the good deal here, right? So people need to rethink like how we think about seeds, how we think about food. Also just to think about how vulnerable our Mother Earth is right now. With all the things that are happening, and we're getting high levels of pollution and just all kinds of like degradation of the environment. So it's nice to talk about regeneration and regenerative agriculture because that's the way it should be. That's the way it was intended to be, and our people practiced those things a long time. Like Steve said, even going right back to where corn began, our people have known that crop and have known that as a food, and we also know it's sacred. And I sometimes I asked last night when I was sort of preparing, I just kind of opened myself to the Creator, and I said, what do I say tomorrow? Because there's a lot to talk about for seeds, and then this message just came to me like, don't forget that we're spiritual people. And when we don't activate our spirituality, we don't activate our crops either. And we don't practice enough. And our spirituality is a great source of power that we're not utilizing. And it's affecting everything that we do and everything we put our minds to. I even say at home, like we even forget to give the people tobacco. We forget to just do the most littlest things that are part of our beliefs and our sacred ways that we're taught to communicate. And so that was what the Creator gave me last night to share, was don't forget about our spirituality. Don't forget to talk to the plants. Don't forget to talk to the Creator. Don't forget to talk to Mother Earth. Put your tobacco down. Give thanks as much as you can. I kind of feel like we might need it. We need that power to be activated so that we're healthy and happy and thriving. Our ancestors made it all this way. They never gave up, not once. They didn't say, it's too hard and there's too much work to do and I quit. They didn't. They kept working, and here we are, right? Like, I'm so thankful, that we're here together today, and we can even talk about these things and meet about these things and even share our seeds with each other. So I feel really grateful. So Steve was talking about the moon, and I use the moon a lot, and for a long time I never talked about the moon. And I would say one day I'm going to talk about the moon and I'm going to learn that more. Then I started flipping through my garden books, and every page had the moon on it, and I said, "Oh, I do follow the moon." But somehow I wasn't recognizing it, because I was taught that like from an early age. It was mostly my father that was talking to me about the moon cycle and when to plant the potatoes and things like that, because my mom is from like an Irish Dutch culture, and my dad is a Mohawk person. So I feel like I was lucky because not just that, I was raised farming, raised knowing about seeds and the importance of them. But all my grandparents and all of their ancestors, they were all farmers. So I felt like without even knowing it, I was given like a great inheritance and a great wealth like of information. And when I started getting old enough to be invited to meetings in the Confederacy, one of the first meetings one of the first seed meetings I went to was in Tonawanda, New York, and Al Brant asked me to come. He had been going to a few meetings, and they said, it's great to come to meetings, but you must bring seed keepers. You must bring farmers. Like, it can't just be academics. It can't just be people wanting to talk and tell stories. It must be people that are talking from experience so that we have the best knowledge and the best resources like going forward. And so I really like what the gentleman ahead of me like shared as well, because that's exactly how I live. And sometimes I feel like I don't fit in because I live that way. I grow the food, I eat the food, I save the seeds, I preserve, we put stuff away. And I've been working really hard on it, like maybe for probably like about 15 years or 20 years. Because there was a time in my life where like I said, I tried to get away from it. I didn't know if I could live this way and do this life, but now I realize I can't not live this life, and I can't live without it. And every time I tried to run away from farming, I got sick. And that's because I couldn't eat the foods that everyone else ate, because I was raised on food that came right out of the ground. Then when I went to university, I was eating popcorn and peanut butter as a staple like diet, because everything else I couldn't eat it. I couldn't eat the foods, but I can eat my own food, and I don't have any problems in that way. But I'd like to pass this around. I just don't know a good way to do it because my book is coming apart. But maybe if we just fold this under, so there's one in pencil that you can look at, but there's a nicer one behind it that I was working on in pen. And like I said, we don't necessarily show this to our funders for the Seed Sanctuary in Gantege. We don't usually show them this full cycle of our year, our lunar year, but we show them like a sort of like a simplified version, but that shows them that seed keeping is a year-long process. Because a lot of the seed keeping part happens in the late fall and through to the spring again, right? Yeah.
May I suggest maybe at lunchtime you put the book somewhere,
Sure.
and then we could go around and take pictures of the 2 pages, so we don't have
Yeah, I was gonna ask her, can you take a photograph?
Yeah, absolutely. Take a photo of it. It's our culture. It's our lunar year. It's sort of what it looks like. But also it shows like some of the main ceremonies, because all of our ceremonies pertain to food. Every single one. Every single one. There's none that don't include sustenance. Our Jinhekwa. It's all part of it. So I also brought some like, so on social media, I discovered this thing where you can print your photos. And because I was using my Instagram like a photo journal, then I realized I could actually print that. So I have a couple of like sort of like photo albums, and you're welcome. I'll put them out with that as well, and you can look at it, and you'll see like different stages of the cycle of life happening. Like in one photo you might see like seed keeping, in another one you might see tapping the trees and making maple syrup, or you might see like jars of preserves or things like that. But I noticed that as I'm getting older, and the environment is changing quite a bit in this last few years, that it's becoming more of a struggle to have those big prolific gardens that I used to have. I don't know if it's because I can't hoe the ground as much, or I don't know what's happening really exactly, but I know that our productivity like is going down. And it really, we're trying to go the other way. We're trying to ramp it upward, but So I'm employing a lot of different practices at my own gardens. And what I'll tell you about where I live, because I live in Gantege, in Tainanega, and that land there, a lot of it's been farmed a long time. And even before the Mohawks were there, the Huron, the Cayugas, they were there. They're farmers too. And then, even going back like further, so where I live and where I farm has been farmed for a long, long time. And so it's really important to practice regeneration and, and to recognize that the practices that Champlain and Cartier so nicely documented for us on their trip down the St. Lawrence and into our lands, that was in the 1500s. And the agronomic practices that they documented in 1500 among the Haudenosaunee, or back then they called us Iroquois, are still the leading practices in the world for regenerative, sustainable, stable agriculture. Our people, that was their knowledge, their wisdom, their practices was documented, and still there is nothing current that goes past what was documented in 1500s. They're still the leading agronomic practices, not just of North America, not just of Turtle Island, but of the world. And that says something. That says about how in tune our people were with the environment and with the lands that they lived on and that they depended upon. So I like to share that because I remember when I was younger and I read that and I was in awe. Like I'm often in awe of our people, like amazing. So I want to tell you a little bit about seeds that I have and that I've been working on and curating, because I started receiving seeds of my own when I think the first seed I really was gifted to me was my dad, and he gave me a corn that we're now calling Mohawk White. And I've bred it a couple times with Tuscarora because I thought it was Tuscarora. I was growing up being told that. But then as I learned more about Tuscarora corn, I'd say, what happened to the shoulders and where's this? And I started noticing like physically a difference. And when you get to be around seeds and corn, and when some people can look at it and it's just all corn, but I can look at it and start to because your eyes get trained. And even last year, wasn't even my eyes that led me, it was my fingertips and my hands, because I had some trouble seeing last fall. And so I was sorting all the seeds by feel. Just feeling it for holes, feeling it for indentations that don't belong there. So when you get really intimate with seeds, there's a lot you learn. And even sometimes I feel like, because they're in my home, they're basically in every part of my life, I sometimes feel like I get messages and I get spoken to, because they're just as much as like us, we're physical, but we're also spiritual beings. And inside the seed is Oranda, that spirit, right? Just like us, it has to have a will, a volition to carry on. And we have that, and they have that. And I think there's these commonalities, that we share with the seed world and their lives too. And so it's just innate that we're part of each other. And we eat them and they nourish us, and we plant and continue on that relationship. But my first seed was the Mohawk White. And then quickly after that, I was given the bean that we call Duane Baptiste. It's a white bean that's used in soups, and it's really a popular bean. It seems like no matter what community you go to, they know Duane Baptiste, or they at least know the bean. And so those two is kind of where I started. And then I was also given the Deserano bean a few years later, but I got really scared because Deserano bean and Dwayne Baptiste bean look alike. They're like everything in creation has a look-alike. And there's lots of beans that look alike, but they can be totally different. Like, for example, Deserano bean is a pole bean. Dwayne Baptiste is a bush bean. You start to get to know these things over time, right? And you can plan and do a lot of like stuff with your garden. But over time, other people, like when I started to go out to a few meetings, other people started to know me, and my parents knew farmers at Six Nations and in different places in the Confederacy. So I got mentored by people like Ione Anderson, and she even gave me some seeds. And one day she was expecting to see me at an event, and I wasn't there. And she called out, "Anyone here from Tainanega that could take something to Janice Brant?" And I was so honored, you know, that she wanted to make sure that I had her corn especially, you know. And so I started receiving those different gifts for quite a few years. And then, like I said, as my path sort of meandered around and I started coming back to it, then all of a sudden I was being given more seeds again. And so so a lot of the seeds I have a story. They have a person that meant something to me, that was the farmer or the curator of them. And so I feel really lucky. In the last maybe 5 to 10 years, I started really branching out, though I really focused a lot on Haudenosaunee crops for a big part of my farming. But I started to, just by what nature was showing me, I started to expand my repertoire for saving seeds. So I was really good at saving corn. I was really good at beans. I was not too bad at squashes. I was really good at potatoes and sunflowers, but then things started happening in my garden. Like all of a sudden, like stuff that would normally die off because of our winter wasn't dying off. And now it was growing, and I could collect the seed off biennials. And so I really started to expand, and what you'll see in the box is that expansion. And so these are some of the seeds that I brought from our own gardens that we can share today. And I really had some other plans in mind to share a bit more of our Haudenosaunee varieties today, but I had to start taking care of my mom about 3 weeks ago, so it kind of threw me off, and I haven't quite adjusted to. I always knew there would be this time where I'd start taking care of my parents, my mom and stuff, but this sort of, like I was kind of ready, but not ready. Anyway, so I didn't get to pack up as much seeds as I like. But mainly I work with, I have 13 corn that I predominantly work with. I try not to get into other corns only because they're harder to keep. Like we can usually only grow 1 or 2 per year if we're lucky. When I was younger and more robust, I could get 3 in a season because I could have bigger gardens and distance them and do like different kinds of things to ensure we could have those 3 reproduce properly without like a lot of cross-pollination, or mostly without any at all is what we strive for. So 13 corn and about, I think we're up to about 60 different kinds of beans. I think they said that, I think in some of the documentation about Haudenosaunee, like seeds and agriculture, I think they said that we had like maybe close to 100 varieties of beans. And I even saw another passage that said that some families would keep up to 30 varieties per family. So like, there was a lot of effort and a lot of backing each other up. So you might have Deserano bean and I have it, and then I give some over here. So then if there's ever a problem, I come find you and I go see you. And we're like Steve, you know, a lot of how we got to know each other. Well, we met and then he said, well, I should probably visit you. And I'm like, okay. So then I felt like the pressure of being like, you know, sort of checked out, right? Like, it's like, is this woman really what she says she is? Because one, she's kind of young. And no, I just can't, I just wanted to throw that in there. Is this woman really doing all these things? And so he would come and visit my gardens, and sometimes he'd bring other seed keepers. No pressure. No pressure. And then one time he gave me some potatoes, those Seneca cowhorn. And I was really happy because I've been working on potatoes a lot and building up my skills for that. Plus, it's something I really like as a food. And my husband and I, for a really long time now, have been growing Peruvian blue, but we grow it from our own stock. So what we call it is, it's a Tyndonega land race now, because it's been there so long, and other people in the community have taken to growing it as well. But one of the things that I really like, because potatoes got mentioned earlier, so I kind of want to talk about potatoes, because I brought potatoes to share a little bit with you. So we've been doing Peruvian blue for getting close to 20 years. And what I found lovely about Peruvian blue is that over time, it really took to our land. And it would, if you left one behind, it would pop up the next year, and there it would be, growing and making potatoes. So then I really knew that Peruvian blue had become very happy in the region that we live in and in Tyndonega. So we'll keep growing that Peruvian blue. And what I like about our own potato varieties is they're a complex carbohydrate. Do people know what that means? So a lot of potatoes that you buy, commercial to industrial potatoes, commercial potatoes, are simple. That means like they're a simple carbohydrate, which tends to drive our sugars higher, right? Like for the diabetics in the room, that's high. Those just turn instantly into sugar. But if you can switch to a Haudenosaunee variety with it's more complex, then you're having a food that's more suitable to our own DNA, our own genetics. So we have even that in common with our seeds. Like, it's not just a seed. They are designed to work with our DNA because they are our plants. And so the Seneca cowhorn, Steve's daughter delivered it to me. And when I first saw it, of course I love it. I love it. I love them instantly because they're seed. But I thought, oh my gosh, I've got these tiny little potatoes, and what if I fail? That's all I could think of. Like, I made 4 little hills in my garden with these little potatoes. And the next season when Steve came by to visit me, I was able to give him about 1 liter of those potatoes then to share with other people or to take and grow them. And we just sort of been doing that. We just, every time we reproduce them, we try to share some. So that one day, or in the near future, there'll be lots of people with Seneca cowhorn, because I get scared, because what if I lose it? And then what happens? Or who am I going to go to? Who am I going to go to if I have a crop failure? I think about those kinds of things, right? And so it inspires us to share the seed. And a lot, I do my art as well as garden, because I get inspired a lot, like to cook and do art from working in nature. So I try to sell my art and not my seeds as a way to, I don't know, just try to be different, try to do something that feels good in my heart. Because I do sell some seeds and I do barter some seeds and trade. But we also give a lot of seeds, just gift them. Because the seeds, if I've learned anything, is that they are very generous. And that's the way we're supposed to be too. We're supposed to be generous. But it takes time though to be generous too, right? We have to build up our stock and our resources so that we can share it to others. But when you open a squash and you see that belly just laden with seed, right? That's a teaching because they're so generous and so giving. And all they want is for us to be healthy and to be nourished and to have happiness and feel secure in the world. And one of the things that helps us feel secure is knowing we have food, right? That makes us all feel so much better. But when we're walking around with the threat of where will we get our next meal, or where will we get our seeds, or, that can make us feel really stressed and really confused and all those kind of feelings. And even I noticed myself one day, because I try to work a lot with youth. I feel like they inspire me. They give me things. And so I like to try to work with them. And one day I found myself saying, "You're the next leaders," and then I realized, wait a minute, I remember how I felt when people used to say that in front of me when I was younger. It was pretty intimidating, pretty scary. So I said to myself, what I want to do instead of saying that, I'm going to treat them like it. Instead of saying you're the next leaders, I'm going to treat them like they are the next leaders. And so how do you do that? You invite them in for tea. You invite them for dinner. You make them feel loved and appreciated and honored and respected. And you, be generous to them, and you give them your time, and you teach them all the things that, that you have to share with them. Because even I think they feel a lot of pressure today, young people. And, we have this great gift for them all ready to go. So thanks to our ancestors, right? And all the people that have continued it on, that we have this beautiful legacy of food to share with them. And it doesn't have to just be Haudenosaunee foods. Because like Steve said, we're modern people. We eat kale. I like it. So I feel like, I include other foods in my diet, not just Haudenosaunee foods, although I do try to use that diet because it's the best diet for this temple that I can find. It's the best thing to nourish my body and keep me going. So I said about corn, I said about beans. We have about 5 squashes, but I've sort of just been holding on them the last couple of years because we've been having a lot of problem with a problem called vine borer. And so I see no heads nodding. It's a problem, and I really don't want it to take out the last of my squash seeds. So I'm sort of holding on to try to wait till the right time, or until I, have some strategy, I guess, in mind. And so we do about, I think we have about 3 different kinds of peas. And peas are North American. And, we probably ate some different forms of peas. And another thing we have is we have 4 potatoes, and we have 4 sunflowers that we work on. And so when I say we work on them, we're trying to keep them the way they are. We're not trying to let them mutate in any way. The only thing we want is that they be grown out. They can adapt to the environment. They have that memory, because they know now more than ever that regional adaptation is really important, especially during climate change. And regional adaptation is like what Steve said earlier, as the example was, you can get seeds from, China or a different country or even California. But are those seeds going to do good in Ganawage? That's the question, right? Is a seed that's bred in an environment where they never have been outside ever, such as maybe seeds that you buy at Canadian Tire, have maybe grown in a laboratory and never been in soil or never even been outside. And we cannot forecast how they'll do, really. But with these seeds, in our own seeds, we can forecast how they'll do, because indigenous seeds tend to have a high germination rate. They're better cared for because they're hand-tended, and they'd be more prolific, and they're just better quality overall. So I know I'm maybe a little off topic from Haudenosaunee specific, seed keeping. But I hope that my photos, this box of seed and those jars of seeds will serve like as an example and as, more information about Haudenosaunee seed keeping. And so maybe I'll just say a couple more things. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'll just see if you have any questions. Anyone like to ask?
I want to know about harvesting the seeds. So you say you open squash and it's full of seeds. So now that you see it, it's like, okay, so how do you?
So like the steps, you mean? Mm-hmm. Okay. So for squash, specifically what I do, for one, is I leave it on the vine as long as possible. You want those seeds, in any of your seed keeping, you want the seeds to be as mature as possible. So like with a bean, when it's on the plant and it's brown or turned yellow and you hit it and it sounds like a rattle, that's perfect. That's a perfect time to keep that for seed. And then I even take them in the house, and when I shell them, I actually lay a lot of my seeds in cardboard boxes in the house for a while, because I cure them all before I put them in jars, like back there with the jars. So by curing them, basically you're just air drying. You're making sure that there's no moisture, because when it goes in the jar, you don't want anything to start growing or. And with the squashes, and other people may want to add their thoughts to that too. With the squashes, again, I let it get as mature as possible on the vine. Sometimes I even pick a bat, like one that's starting to go bad because it's been in the field so long. Because it might be bad on the outside, but what's on the inside is fully mature and ready and ripe. And that's the seed you want. And then when I cut it open and I take the seeds out, I know there's a couple of different ways of doing this. Some people do almost like a fermenting type of process where they let the seeds lay in a bit of water and then rinse them and then pour it. But what I tend to do myself is I rinse them just to take off as much of the pulp as I can. But then what I tend to do for drying them, and you can lay them on a screen or something like that to dry, but because I end up doing a lot in my house, I buy coffee filters that have no chlorine bleach. They're completely natural. I lay that on top of a paper plate, and then I put the seeds on top of that in just a single layer to dry. And the reason I do that is because those coffee filters, whatever they're made of, you can pull the seeds off it without damaging them. Where if you use a paper towel or a newspaper, sometimes that ends up being stuck to the seed. So just watch what you're using, because there is it does have a result in the end. And then there's a technique you can do with squash and pumpkin seeds and stuff like that, is you can check them for viability just by snapping them. So if you can break it with your finger, you can just discard it. You should not be able to break it. You shouldn't be able to break it with your finger by touch. So that's how I sort them out, because if it's nothing in it, it'll just snap or break. Or if it's not a viable seed, it will just break. So that's a technique for sorting out squash and pumpkin seeds to make sure. And you only do that when they're really nice and dry, just before you're putting them in your jars or whatever. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Is that helpful? Yeah.
So I'm trying to build up my bean collection too with my seeds. And I noticed, I don't know if it's a pollination issue or maybe poor seed saving, but you see a lot of not fully formed seeds. So I know in the past, you'd shell your seed, your beans, you'd put them in the jar, and then in the spring you take a handful. But now I was thinking, should I be making sure that I have full pods, 8 seeds or 7, 8 seeds per pod before Or is it a pollination?
No, I don't think it's a pollination thing. I think sometimes all the seeds and beans don't all develop all at the same time. Exactly, right? Like sometimes they do, but sometimes not. So I wouldn't necessarily think it's a pollination thing. And beans are self-pollinating predominantly, so they make they're good for seed keeping.
So I should be selective in the pods.
You select them. You select. That's what you do. That's what our people did. And they sorted them. So even when I was a young girl, my mom would sit us down at the table by the wood stove, because that was the warmest place in our big old farmhouse. And she would give us all a ruler, a little wooden ruler. Remember the little wooden rulers? And she'd say, okay, kids, now what I want you to do is this. All the nice, big, plump, perfect ones, they go right in the center. If it has a little indentation, it goes over here. If it's not fully the way it should look, it goes over here. And so basically all our seeds, and I've continued this practice a lot because I was trained to do it, is to sort everything. I sort everything. I look at everything. So what you see in these jars is basically our highest quality, our A-line seeds. Our B-line seeds, sometimes I give them to younger people or kids or new people starting out, just practicing. But a lot of the second and third grade seeds we eat. So they're not, you don't have to throw them away, you just eat them instead of keeping them for seed, because you only want to keep your best ones.
Would you look for the pods that were like the largest, most fully developed?
Sometimes I pay attention to the pods. Sometimes I photograph them because sometimes I'll find ones that are maybe unusually long, or, I do pay attention to it. And it's good to pay attention to the seed pods too, because say like the ganawage bean, that ganawage soup bean, it has a colored pod. It's not just solid green. Like other beans have a green pod, but that one has a red and green pod. So it's good to look at them because that also helps you identify the varieties. You can identify them by looking at them at different, stages. So yeah, we store a lot of our seeds, and even with our corn, and I didn't bring any braids today, but when we braid our corn, we select out. So what we braid often first is the seed grade, what we call seed grade. And then the next braids that we do are all the ones of corn that we want to eat, but we're just storing it. And then the corn that's are kind of like the lowest grade, that's the stuff we keep in a corn crib, and then we shell it, and that all gets eaten. So see how it's just the way that our agriculture is. It's like a built-in system of here's the seeds, here's the food, it's all like, it seems like it's all there. It's like a complete system.
So basically, if you have a seed pod that only has 3 seeds in it, the seed in there is just as good if it looks just as good as the one.
Yes, it is. Yeah. My mom said that the older people, like in Tainanega, were really finicky, very particular when they were sorting there, because that's kind of how she learned it, and then she got us doing it. We were the child labor, but it was fun. We thought it was a game. When you're a little kid, it's fun.
Yeah.
I just had a question about when you plant squash, because I always put my squash at the bottom end of the garden where it's most wet. And I used to see people who used to throw seeds all over the community. You would find like low and wet areas like near creeks where it would flood the spring. And we used to go there in the fall. We used to think that it was the pumpkin patch there from Charlie Brown. But then we found out that old people used to go there and they used to throw seeds. And I asked the old man, I said, why do you do that? He said, you don't have to water it. As long as you go in and if there's any kind of plants that are competing, you should pull the weeds.
Yeah.
He said after that the squash will run. So I try to get an elevation where the squash are at the lowest part so that they can run the vines upwards, the beans and the corner in the middle.
Yeah.
But I tried to rotate it. This was wondering what your thoughts are about it, because I was told my boards are pain in the butt.
I like what you're saying, because, you know, like I remember reading this passage that said, the Haudenosaunee scarcely took a step without putting down a seed. And that was like, wow, it's like our people put seeds everywhere. They knew how to make a food system and how to make it plentiful. And in our garden a lot we use the squashes as a barrier around the corn. And I even go out and as the vines are growing, I make them follow the garden. Like, so if my squash is starting to go off into the lawn or something, I'll grab it and I'll pull it around and I'll keep pulling all the vines around the corn because it'll keep out predators and raccoons and things. So that's how I use the squashes a lot. But yeah, like I love that story. I think that makes so much sense. Our people would have done stuff like that. They probably even would purposely put seeds in areas where they're going to go back to forage anyway. Because even something I've really started practicing a lot, and I know I'm at a time, something I've really been practicing a lot is foraging my own gardens. You don't have to go off somewhere else. You can do it right at home, and it's so helpful. We get a lot of amaranth, or what they call pigweed, but it's really wild amaranth. It's delicious, it's nutritious, it's so high in so many good things. And I don't have to plant that. It just grows. When I work the garden, certain things just grow. And at one time I used to pull it all out and throw it in a heap. And now I just eat it all. I don't throw it away. Because you don't have to. Once you know the edibles that are there that just pop up when you're gardening, you can just start eating them. And I even started getting away from planting too many lettuces and things like that because I was enjoying the pigweed and we call it lamb quarter. I don't know if other people have a name for that, but we call it lamb quarter. And lamb quarter and pigweed together make an excellent salad. And then if you do have like salad greens, well, you can dress it up with that too. And it's just so delicious and easy to do because you're out there gardening anyway.
Quarter seeds also turn rice into a complete protein.
Nice. Something else people talk about right now is the wild parsnips. I don't have that because I ate all mine. People laugh at me. They say, oh, I have a problem with a wild parsnip. And I said, I'll be over in the spring. And I come with my shovel and bucket and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm going to eat it. So you can do what you want, but I like it. And it tastes great and it's free. And yeah, so you just have to go get it, right? And also wild carrot, I've done the same thing. There's no wild carrot in my garden and there is no wild parsnip because I've basically just eaten it all. And now I find it on fence lines and other places where I can harvest it because certain things like that are really prolific. And I guess my last words will just to say that, you know, we have these great gifts and agriculture practices and seeds that are so respectful. You know, we have our spirituality, you know, which gives us strength and helps us communicate. And I just hope everybody will, you know, have a good season and grow lots of good food that you can share and seeds that you can keep for the next year. So, but I guess one thing that I did learn, as a young person, I thought I could just do it all myself and I could be self-sufficient and sustainable and all that great things. But as I got older, I realized, that's an illusion that happens by yourself. That doesn't happen by yourself. It takes unity. It takes people working together on all levels to create like that kind of stability amongst our food and seeds. And so, yeah, thank you. Thanks for.